Okay. Hey, Sinora, good morning. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm back from vacation, all tanned from Caribbean. I think I'm just
Wow.
driving already.
I, I,
How are
I,
you?
I envy you. You are running away from the snow, which is outside the house, right? You ran
Exactly.
away
I
from
just
it.
came back from 31 degrees and I'm in 0 degree right now, and I don't know how my body's going to adapt to that. But yeah, it's snowing today.
Absolutely, absolutely. So everything is white.
Oh
So
yeah.
we have four guests today. Wow. Okay. So you
Wow.
want to
We have
run
a
through the
full
with with
introduction
house.
with white background.
with white background and snow is
Exactly.
all over. Snow is all
We
over.
are all sunny behind because we already have so much of white. Yeah, but we have a full house and I'm so excited for today. So I think we have people from all over the world today. So we have everyone from across the region. So let's do a small intro, everyone. And yeah, namaste to all of you. And I would like to know a little about you all.
So Peter,
So
let's start with you if you want to go with.
Okay, well, as an American living in Switzerland, I'll say hello, it's great to be here. And then as a Swiss, I have to say it in at least three languages. So I'll say Grüezi miteinander, es freut mich hier zu sein. That's my best attempt at Swiss German. If we're going to do real German, I'd say Guten Abend miteinander or Guten Abend zusammen. Es freut mich hier zu sein. As a Swiss French, I would say Bonsoir tout le monde, c'est un plaisir d'être ici. And of course, as a Ticinese Swiss Italian, I would say Buonasera a tutti, è un piacere di essere qui.
amazing.
Yes.
Namaste, Peter.
Good evening to you
Namaste.
too.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we can pass the ball to Deepti.
Yes.
Hey, Sinora with the beautiful name and face. It's Deepti
Thank you.
from India. Namaste, salam, Shubh. Abhi Ratri is not there, but yeah, good evening and good afternoon wherever everyone is. I am Deepti. I am an Agile consultant. I run a boutique which is called Agile Virgin, which offers various solutions around agility. And I'm also a community person because I am that student who can thrive and learn the most in group studies. And so that's why I know all these wonderful people and learn so much and get to do so much. So that's about me, and I'll pass on the ball to Vivek.
Thanks, Deepti. Namaskar. I'm Vivek Sinha. I'm enterprise agile coach, but nowadays I also proudly call myself as a co-creator of ACM or creator of Agile Contract Manifesto. So that's me. And I'm in India right now in Pune, and I will pass words to Stein, my old good friend. I mean, not old, but my very good friend from very old time, Stein.
Relatively old, no problems there. Goedenavond iedereen. En bedankt om mij uit te nodigen. Ik vind het fijn om hier te zijn. This was my Flemish welcome. I'm from Flanders, which is a part of Belgium. I'm working for Capgemini, and in Capgemini, I'm responsible for Agile and DevOps. So across the globe, this is a pleasure to support the Agile ways of working.
Oh, welcome to the chat show from Agile World Indy. And we definitely want to understand, okay, we have seen the Agile Manifesto, right? Because we are all Agilists over here and people know about it. But what made you think something on the Agile Contract Manifesto? So how was this born, first of all? How does this idea come up?
Probably I will start, and then of course Edward. Back then I was also working with Capgemini, and we have we go to many customers, and over the years, and Stein is our global agile leader, so we were working with many clients, and every client was trying to create their contract framework, like their delivery was happening in agile, or either they are already agile or transforming into agile, but the contract was continued to be old way, and sometimes that's become hindrance to real agility. We all felt this pain, and there was always conversations. Everyone wanted to put together a framework. The question was, how do we know that the framework that we are creating is really an agile contract framework, or it's just we are using some jargons, epic and velocity and so forth here and there, but we are ending up, sometime like we called old wine in new bottle. So we start to look at agile frameworks. Like we can very confidently and very proudly say that Scrum is agile framework, because everything of a Scrum practices, roles, ceremonies, everything of Scrum is very well aligned with Agile Manifesto values and principle. When it's come to Agile Contract Framework, where is the validation? Where is the manifesto? So I think the whole sourcing world, not just Agile world, but Agile sourcing, procurement, definitely needs something which can help people or inspire people to create a real agile frameworks and not the namesake one. And that's where we start to create this idea that we are creating frameworks, and sometimes even we are not fully confident. Probably we need to take a step back and we need to start with something like manifesto, and from there this idea start to pop up. And Stan suggested we will be super fool if we try to create our own. It should be global initiative, and there should be right set of people, expert like Peter, etc., should be there in this quorum. And this is how this whole movement started February last year, so it's almost a year now.
Nice.
I'd like to add one thing to that, Vivek. That in the very beginning, the question we always get asked is, well, it's nice that you want to do a real agile game, but give us a template, right? Here, give us a template for a good contract. We have tried this for years, and I think many companies have tried this for years. There is no such thing as one template for agile contracts, because the circumstances are so different that making a template would again become something that you imprison people in. It cannot solve all the issues. And so what we wanted to do is to give principles, right? The way of thinking when you design a contract. And we thought that would be a smarter approach.
And I'm going to say yes and to that. In fact, giving a template is almost anti-agile. We might even call it fake agile, because you're saying, well, follow the rules, follow, just do Scrum the way it's written in the book, and you're going to be agile. And unfortunately, life isn't that simple. Agility is about problem solving. Agility is about dealing with complex challenges. And there's nothing more complex than bringing two organizations, especially two large organizations, together, agreeing on something, and then kind of remembering what they agreed on. Okay, and I think. Actually, Sten, I think it was you who brought us to the work of the World CC, the World Contracting, what is it, Coalition Convention, something like that. These people are actually
World Commercial and Contracting.
World Commercial and Contracting. They're actually advancing the state of the art of contracting, and what they have on their homepage is contracts bind the world's economies together. Contracts is how organizations make agreements and make commitments to each other. And what we're seeing around the world is that organizations individually, they want to be more agile, they want to be more flexible, they want to be better at responding to things that are complex. But no organization, or few organizations, work in isolation by themselves. They collaborate with other organizations, sometimes on a peer-to-peer basis, sometimes on a client-supplier basis, but there's always collaboration. And so if this collaboration is going to be more what we call agile, that is more responsive, more able to deal with, the unexpected, well, then somehow the contracts are going to have to be more responsive and more agile as well. And this isn't an easy thing to do, because, contracts are about setting in stone the things that we're not going to change our mind on for, a long period of time. And, oh, wait a minute, but the stone needs to be flexible. And I think that's the tension that the Agile Contracts Manifesto is living in, and why it's so important to have values and principles, and why it's totally unrealistic to expect a template.
Yeah. And then we started thinking, who do we need for this endeavor? So who would be the right people to come up with strong enough ideas that it really becomes a living, a real thing? And well, we are fortunate to have found 13 really, really excellent brains, but we put them in different categories. We made sure it was not just suppliers, for example, because they would make a supplier story of the challenge, not just buyers, because they would only think about the interests of the buyers, or they would have a one-sided story. So we have 3 types of people who have helped in creating this. There were buyers, there were sellers, and there were experts. And so Peter was talking about World CC, but we also have Mirko Kleiner, who is somebody who helps procurement organizations in putting up lean agile procurement. And we had people who are on the buying side, people who are buying services from large organizations or from freelancers. So how, what are the challenges that they have? And bringing that together, 13 people from those three groups was what we thought would be the right approach.
Nice. So
Nice.
there would be a challenge as well, right? When you are getting 13 best of the industry, one of the best of the industry brains, right? Because everybody has
And
a
in
lot of
climate
thought
science.
process. Yeah, exactly. So like this is getting excited. That's the reason I'm asking, because it's a very learning question for all of us. Anybody who is listening to this thing, right? Because when you are getting 13 great brains from the industry to come up with a manifesto, and how was the challenge being taken? Who was the person who would drive this challenge forward?
I think I'll take that up because there is a huge gratitude that goes out from group to Vivek and to Sten, and then for Peter to constantly, looking at the content. So I think there was this core team, and then there were a lot of people on the periphery. There was a lot of gathering in terms of information, ideation, in terms of as they have already shared, there are different verticals which we took in consideration, whether it is vendors, whether it is sourcing, whether it is services, and it was not just about IT and software, but in general, because it was all about principle, it was all about thought process that holds, just like how Agile is all about. It of course came up from software, but it's not generic and only for software. So challenges were more around how to gather data. So, the appreciation is about the workshops which were done, the big funnel, and then ideas going down and filtering out. So that was a very interesting activity. Also, when you start with something, there is huge response from everyone has a lot of ideas, and then it all fizzles down. So continuing that momentum, and then constantly reflecting on content, how it should be, then constantly gathering feedback on that content from various experts, from thought leaders, from end users. That was again another interesting effort that everyone put in. And I'm sure, all the other panelists will have a lot to add to, but I just thought, because they have done huge contribution, and I wanted someone to blow trumpet and appreciate their effort, all three of them here. So I thought I'll, bear the torch, and of course, then I'll pass it on. So the last one was how to take word out, to the wider audience so that they can actually make use of it. So I think these were all interesting challenges where the efforts were made, and amazing people like you who are helping us take our word to wider audience. I think, yeah, that's what. And so I'll pass on, to rest of the panel. What do they think about it?
I think for me, it was really interesting. I didn't realize this when we started, but after we've been working together for a couple of months, I realized we have an Agile team. What is an Agile team? An Agile team is a cross-functional team. Okay, it has all the skills that you need to get the job done. And as Sten pointed out, we had the procurement side, we had the vendor side, and we had some experts, if you will, the Agilist side, and each one of them brought their side, and I can remember, in cases where, I had proposed text, which kind of had an Agilist spin to it, and one of the guys on the more business side said, hey, wait a minute, if you say that, this is going to offend people, and it's just going to turn them off, and it's not going to work. Now, this is, if you will, it's actually pushing yourself way out of your comfort zone to create a cross-functional team like this. But, you see the language in the manifesto about, an Agile team is inclusive. Well, it's inclusive of all points of view, and it's not about the Agilists pushing, the deadweight contract guys out of the way so we can get down to work, because, those contract guys, they actually are contributing value to the project, whether they're on the purchasing or the vendor side. And we needed to get all of these perspectives in. And that led us in our choice of language, I think, to be much less, I think the ideas are just as radical, but I think the language that we chose is much less radical. There's less shouting in our manifesto than there is in the original manifesto. We're trying to reflect things that work. We're trying to respect the perspectives so that everyone feels respected, and that we can really come to the table, and come up with something that gives good guidance for everybody.
Are you saying we're more civilized, or?
Sorry?
Are you saying we're more civilized?
No, I'm saying we have the bruises and we kind of stopped beating each other up, and that discovered that works better.
No, but this is it's touching upon one of the interesting challenges we had in the very beginning. You have bright people around the table, people who are spoken out. They have their opinions. And Peter, you were the first one to point to me to the challenge of how are you ever going to make this a team? How are you ever going to make these people trust each other enough to come up with something which is impactful enough? Because it's easy to fully respect each other and to say every idea can come on the table, but in the end you will end up with something that goes in every direction. And so, there you go, Peter.
Well, it's interesting because I'm remembering our first conversation as you say this, and you and Vivek and Pradeep and a couple of others, you'd kind of already started thinking about it. There's also some crosstalk. Maybe someone wants to mute. So, you'd already done a lot of thinking about it, and I thought, oh man, he wants to bring in a couple of experts to just kind of, ratify what's gone on before. But of course, that's, all of the experts, they want to bring in their ideas. And if they had no space to do that, well, then, then the infighting starts. And so, I thought it was really amazing because, Stin then stepped back and said, okay, we actually have to create a team and we have to give them the whole problem from the beginning. And so we formed ourselves as a team. We formulated the problem. We thought about what it is we wanted to say. And so what looked like it was 90% done and we just need to bring in some more experts to sign on the dotted line, it was actually, we had to kind of go back for the beginning and really solve the whole problem together. But because we did that, we got a solution that really everybody, that everybody believed in. And so, we really were an agile team. And I also think, I'm trying to remember which number it is, but we have a principle in there which says agile collaboration starts before the contract is written and extends beyond the deliverables. Okay. And that's exactly what we experienced in our own work, that the agility had to start. It goes in really from the beginning, from the word go. And again, we were an agile team and we were an agile project. And, I think we have very much Stin to thank for that, for actually, following through on that. So we're going to pass a lot of flowers around today, just for the record, because this is.
No, that sounds great, actually, and it's amazing to hear that you actually created this like in a more agile way. You kind of rediscovered so you went through all the norming, storming, performing kind of a stage through within your own team, and that's why it took a year. It's not like you just thought it and then you just put it on the paper and then it just went by. No, it had its own stages to go through. So why don't we talk about what are these principles? How many principles do we have, or what are we trying to what is it? And what are we trying to impact? Is it the culture of the organizations that we are targeting? Is it only at the leadership level, or is it all the teams? So why don't we stay there?
Who are you asking you this? Because I'm sure we all want to dive into this.
No, but I'm actually.
You may start this time.
All right. So the structure of the contract manifesto, as we wrote it, is following pretty neatly the original Agile manifesto. We have 4 values and we have 10 principles. I know that in the original contract, in the original manifesto, there are 12 principles. The 4 values are a coincidence. We had, I think, 6 values at some point in time, and then it became 5, and then for some reason, one of them was not strong enough anymore, and we kicked it out because it was already covered in some of the principles. And we now have 4 values left. And in those values, we want to highlight things which you need to have, things which you need to have in a relationship between vendor and supplier. Vendor and buyer. But also things which you need when you go agile. So, for example, the first one is saying you need to have your contract oriented around tangible outcomes more than around specified deliverables.
Mm-hmm.
We are not saying that specifying your deliverables is a mistake.
Yeah.
We're saying that you should give more attention to the tangible outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
So we're focusing from output to outcome as well, while
from output, which is a scope, which is
Yeah.
a typical contract, is oriented around a certain scope.
Yes.
When you go into the agile world, you know that things are going to change. So if you have your base contract based on scope, then the only option you have is to have strong change management, to have a lot of overhead, and actually putting a lot of effort into the wrong thing. Right, your scope is going to change. So why don't you put a contract that manages around that, rather than that you have to manage your changing scope? And we thought that the best way of doing that is to focus the outcomes on the outcomes, and the outcomes are the results of your output. What you are going to put out, you don't know yet, but what the result of that is going to be is something you can think about together. And that is what you should be putting in your contract.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And I think it's never set in stone when we get into the project and when we get to start and what are we actually delivering. You can't just set it in stone from the very beginning with it's already waterfall when you are signing those 1,000 or those contracts. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it has a lot of consequences. If you're going for output, well, who signs a contract without exactly knowing what the output is?
Yes.
So there's a lot of investigation already needed, a big upfront design, as we try to avoid it in the agile world, because we know you cannot, base a contract on a lot of assumptions and a lot of studies, etc. You lose a lot of time, which you will probably have to throw away when you are executing. So that's
and
those are consequences.
Sorry,
right?
Yeah, and output goes on changing as well, as you said. It's an agile world, right? And outcome is at least something is going to come out and it's fixed that okay, it has to be a working software, for example, if it's going to be working, or if it's going to be a networking. If you want to do an IoT project, then the outcome has to be that all devices need to communicate with each other, for example. So I think okay, that's quite a strong statement which you'll have put in.
Can I add something
Sure.
additional, which is not literally there, which is the majority of companies that we make contracts with, we see that when they understand they can't contract on output, a lot of companies start to understand that, output is scope is no longer the thing to contract on. They automatically revert back to the other option, which is time and material, right? So we will now only buy your services. That's what we buy. This is not strong enough, I think, right? It's around the outcomes that you should start contracting. If you only start contract around the services that the other one is providing, then you don't know, where is the objective of having those services? Why do you need this person? What kind of person do you need? And if you're not clear about the outcomes of your contract, then you will miss all of that. And you will have people who are just there to make their hours, right? That's not the agile way of working either. Okay, so that's why we are putting the focus on outcomes.
Yeah.
Peter, would you like to add something?
One of the things that we used a lot was, how shall I say? We were building on examples. Okay, we were looking at real examples from real life, either from our experience or things that we'd seen, anywhere from the press to the personal examples. In my case, what was really inspiring was, the success that NASA has had over the last, both the success and failure, I should say, the success and failure that NASA has had contracting for rocket ships, because they've actually applied both of these models, outcome-based and deliverable-based. And oddly enough, the outcome-based has been much more successful for NASA than deliverable-based. Okay, and so from the, this isn't just the agile software guys saying this is what works in a software context. We really made an effort to look beyond just software and say, what's universal in dealing with complex projects. And so, behind every one of these values and principles, there is at least one and usually several stories of, why this is a good thing or why doing the opposite is a bad thing or generally leads to less good results.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Okay, and we tried to codify the stuff that leads to good results.
And if I may ask, okay, when we are looking at, because of agility, which is out there, business agility, when we talk about, right? We are not talking IT or software or hardware. How feasible are these contract manifestos for non-IT people? Because there are contracts also happening as well, right? For example, for services, okay, it not as a software as a service or a hardware as a service or anything, but let's say marketing. There might be a contract being drawn between two agencies or two companies, that an agency will come and support your marketing and everything. So how would the manifesto cater to those kind of contracts as well?
A very valid question, and I think that was the intention, that it should be applicable overall. So if you take example of even marketing, the simplest example comes out from digital marketing, that this is the package and we will give you 25 posts a month, and we will give you 3 shout outs, and we will give you 2 mailers, and we will also arrange for 1 podcast a month. Now, does it offer you the desired outcome? How often do we reevaluate, the strategy that we have made? Who are our target audience, and how often are they changing with the changing vision that we have? Or is it all about, the standard service, and this standard service is well understood and with a defined vision? What is it all about? So I think the intention here is to create something. It's not about one shoe fitting everyone, but it's about the one thought process, which is meeting the desire for the end user, and in fact both the parties involved. So I think that is what is being looked upon. That is what is the intention behind creating this manifesto. And this is sort of giving guidelines to then every domain, every work stream, how they can then define their contracts. So probably defined contracts will be different, but then the underlying thought process is still going to be same, for all of them.
Nice.
And I think it can also help us in identifying how are we, like with our current HR policies that we have around individual, we are appreciating individuals, we are calling out, instead of focusing on individual, focusing on teams. Like these outcomes can help us make our policies better, make our how we approach outcomes in terms of a team outcome, a project outcome, those kind of things. So I think that could be a shift in the ways we even structure our governance, our policies, our things around contract as well.
Yeah, I mean, you are actually aligning it to context. Is it a global context? Is it a team level context? Or is it a department level context? Makes sense. Absolutely.
Yeah, Peter, you wanted to add?
Yeah, well, so one thing to notice about the manifesto is nowhere does it say you should do this. There's nowhere that it says you have to do this. There's no, there's no finger pointing. There's no, there's no in-laws telling you what, that if you're not doing it exactly the way it's here, that you're not being a good in-law or, whatever. What we're very clear about is that these are things that have worked for us, and we have a broad background of experience, and these are patterns that seems to work quite well. What do they mean for you? Well, the Agile Manifesto the Agile Contract Manifesto, like the original manifesto, is an invitation to think. It's an invitation to look at your own project and say, well, what's going to work for me? And, if you look at your contract and you think about, man, our contract is giving us an awful lot of pain points. Well, you can look at the values and principles of this manifesto and say, well, maybe if we applied some of these values or principles that our pain points would go away, or at least be not so severe. Okay. And maybe looking at the next contract, we say, well, if we try to align ourselves more with the manifesto, it looks like we're going to have fewer pain points. Okay, so it's not a, this was made for IT, or this was made for rockets, or this was made for marketing, or this was made for sales. Although there were people who have been looking at all of these projects, and we kind of all agree on these statements. In fact, I think that was one of the important things about the group. We really, all of us, we agreed with every single word that was written there. You can use this to guide your own work, but of course it's your contract, and it's your name on the dotted line, and you're either the vendor or the client, you're going to be responsible for the results. So you get to look at this, and then you make your best decision and you decide what to do.
Nice. Vivek, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, just maybe one single point, as when we were creating it, many times these definitions, like this debate come as whether it's only for buyer and seller, or is it for any kind of contract. And sometimes we say, why not for any kind of contract, even between employer and employee? Any contract is a contract. And then some of the ideas, for example, if you look at value number 2, some of the ideas is really apply for any kind of contract. As like when it's come to contract, often we try to make try to make it bulletproof. Look at each and every aspect, make it so detailed, 100 pages, 200 pages. And then idea is, how can we make it simple? Maybe, much more clear and simple than making it complex. The language sometimes we use is so complex that only legal people can understand it. Of course, there is no guide, like one should be doing this. The whole idea is it may inspire people to make it more simple and clear than making it bulletproof.
Great. Yeah, that's great point, everyone. So I would actually like to ask you guys to share, a few values and or your favorite principle that you really thought you had worked on it, you applied it in where you are working right now, and it has brought some shift. It has brought some change into your workplace or your thought process or your team's thought process. So anything you want to share, any principles and values from the contract?
So I'd like to maybe build on what Vivek has introduced, namely the second value. First one was around what are we contracting on? Output is more waterfall adapted, and outcome is more agile adapted. The second one is clarity and simplicity more than complexity and completeness. So this is what Vivek was talking about. And maybe to illustrate it, I would like to give the example of comic contracts. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but it's a South African story of people who are picking fruits in the fields for completely out of software. So don't think about software. People who are hired to pick fruits. And they are in that country not always able to read and write, so they're not literate. But they get a contract of 14 pages that they cannot read, and they have to sign it because they get employed. And at some point in time, there is somebody who came up with the idea: why don't we make it a comic book that they can really look at? What are their rights? What are their duties? What are their what kind of money do they get? What are their restrictions? What type of risks are there, etc., etc. And they made it 15 pages, same amount of pages. And then there was a lawyer who said, "Yeah, but this is never going to hold up in court, right? Once we have a dispute and it goes to court, it will never hold up." And they went to the Ministry of Justice and they asked them whether it would hold up if it would come to a litigation. And the result was that the Ministry of Justice said, well, the old contract would not have been valid if it came to court because the people don't know what they are signing. Well, the new one is very clear and explicit about what are the obligations, what are the rights, etc. So this one is a valid contract. A wonderful story. And think about how our software engineers are, there is a World CC again. They have done an investigation about contracts are very important for every business, right? 90% of business people have reported that they find their contracts difficult or impossible to interpret. Think about that number, 90%. And software engineers, testers, analyzers, people who are managing projects, all of them are in contract environments. How many of them understand what they are contracting for? And so what we would urge for here, and I think the problem has always been there, it's not Agile that is, but in Agile, we are going further because Agile is based on things like trust and things like collaboration. And so if you are making a contract and you don't know what is in that contract and you're building on trust, then I think things can go a lot quicker in the wrong direction than in a waterfall contract where you're buying something on a fixed scope and you don't even know what the others are talking about. They're a black box, and as long as they deliver what you sold, then the contract is going to arrange the rest. I think in Agile we cannot afford that anymore, and so there is a bigger need for readable contracts.
No, and that also brings us back to our first value, I think, where we talk about outcomes. Because if the contract is about outcome, then everybody does understand the end vision, the goal that we're trying to achieve. Where I've seen, even when we work with IT teams or even with marketing teams, they know what they have to do in a sprint, but they don't know what they are trying to deliver by the end of the MVP or maybe by the end of the year or the goal that is out there. So it's really important. It's just lovely. Yeah, that's a lovely story you just shared, Sten. So yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, Peter, you wanted to add something? Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to follow up on Sten's story because we talked about what is the scope of the Agile Contract Manifesto. Now, if two companies make an agreement with each other, we call it a contract. If two countries make an agreement with each other, we call it a treaty. Okay? So just 2 days ago, I was trying to find a new ticketing platform. I went to a well-known ticketing platform because they're easy to use and blah, 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 and had all the features that we need. And I went to set it up for my business. Okay. And somewhere along the line, it got to the question, well, where is your business from? And I said, Switzerland. And they said, which provision of the tax reform or the double taxation treaty between Switzerland and the United States are you making apply? So that, some unknown, they didn't even specify why I needed to do it. They just said I had this list of, 15 things and I had no idea what they are. And so you think contracts are bad. Wait till we get to treaties. Okay. And finally, after going through the 12 articles, most of them are written in, well, except for the provision in Article 7.2.3, no one, and nothing in this article shall be construed to apply that article doesn't apply. And I gave up and I said, I need to find another provider where I don't have to go through all this stuff because I was just totally overwhelmed by it. Now I'm just one guy. Obviously if I were a corporate legal department, I could probably, wade through all that stuff. But, this was, the idea that a good treaty is one that anybody can read. Wow. That could be huge, way beyond software.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to ask, I don't know now, as we are running through the principles and the manifestos, now how practical has anybody applied and what was their experience? Of course, you all are authors, so you might have applied it, but then when you're trying to apply it in your organizations or through different organizations, how was it received?
Today only I actually signed a contract. It's a Johannesburg-based startup, but not like a startup. Now they are okay size, fast growing. And actually all these principles and values that we wrote here, I tried to bring from my side. Customer was really understanding. So my first experience after this manifesto is very positive. And kind of my own experiment also, you can say that. Yes, am I able to apply?
Nice. Yeah, Dipti.
And with this new client, okay, so even before I go to this new client, I'll just talk about things that have happened in past with my previous clients. Some of them being mature and having their own team. And, I also a little mature over the time. We focused on desired outcomes that we wanted to have, and yet we knew we'll have to continuously reflect. But and I just started and they just started, I mean, going back 7 years, I used to be over enthusiastic and I would want to commit everything and offer the best. And, not even understanding what exactly was needed, because for two simple reasons. One, I was wanted to offer everything I had. And two, just like a developer, I wanted to, give what I thought is the best, more like uh, how all developers do, best of the technology stack, best of the approach. Yet, what is customer experience? That's never so great if you only go by developers. Uh, and so very recently with this client, there was discussion what to do, what do they want, what we can offer, and all of that. And then, going with the thought process of the current manifesto on which we are working, and so far what we have presented to the world, what came to me was, let's understand what is our desired outcome first. So we are going to do two workshops. One which will be about our discoveries on what do we want. Two will be about our KPIs. How do we measure? And then, of course, in between, what should we do? But for that, we needed what do we want and how do we measure? And which very much aligns with what we have discussed in our principles and our core four principles that which are there in the manifesto.
Nice. So in short, it is like it is practical. It's not just the theory part what we have put in the contract. It's not that okay, people find it difficult to use it or anything. Yes, Stan, you wanted to add something to it?
Yeah. So bringing it to the real world. I'm working for Capgemini, and we typically engage with very large corporates, and so it's always going to be about a big amounts of money, and procurement of the client needs to be able to compare what different companies are offering, and you don't have a scope to base yourself on. So it's not so easy. This is not. If it were easy, it wouldn't need a manifesto. Okay, let's let's make it clear. But there are things which are helping, and there are things which I've been applying in the last couple of years with many clients in around the world, because people understand the problem, but they don't always have the solution. And I think the solution is partly the way that we also are writing the manifesto, one over the other. If you say, we are not saying you should never write a contract around output, because there is sometimes, or in many cases, there is output which is useful to focus on, or there is time and material which could be useful to engage on. But the outcome part is something you should never forget. And so how we make it practical is by, for example, having a little bit of a hybrid contract, where you get paid for your amount of hours, and then on top of that you have a bonus malus system, which is depending on the outcome. Has the client achieved what he or she wanted to achieve? Or you have some output that you ask your provider to provide, and on top of that there is an outcome related on the output, which you give them a bonus or a malus on. And if they if they just produce you the thing that you were asking for without thinking actively, how is this going to be used, how is this going to change the behavior of my customers, etc., then they probably will they will produce something which doesn't have the full potential, the full value. And so these hybrid models are something which really help. Peter?
I think when I compare where we are today with the Agile Contracts Manifesto with where software development was when the original Agile Manifesto was written, the people who wrote the manifesto, some of them had developed Scrum. There were some people from Extreme Programming. There were some people from Crystal. There were some people from DSDM. There were, I don't remember anymore, I think 5 or 6 different frameworks. So people were already coming up with solutions to the problem. Okay. With contracting, oddly enough, I don't think we're anywhere near as far along. I think it's, in some ways, I think it's a much more difficult problem. And we're only starting to see, the first inclinations of a solution, and this is where, like, Mirko Kleiner and his work with Lean Agile Procurement is, as far as I know, really the first attempt to rethink how that whole procurement, and contracting process works. Okay. But I think here we're actually at the beginning of something. We're not at the end of something. We're going to start looking how to do these things and come up with different models. I was really surprised that NASA was actually kind of an early adopter in this process of experimentation, with their whole procurement for commercial cargo and commercial crew. Instead of saying we're going to pay, your effort on a cost plus basis, which is how they were typically required to do it, they said, well, we're going to define some milestones. And vendor, tell me how much it's going to cost to achieve this milestone. So the vendor got to set the price. And then when the milestone was achieved, NASA paid out the corresponding amount of money. Okay. And there was no discussion about how much effort went into it. It was just, well, have you satisfied this test? Okay. Now there's a certain amount of trust required there because, you really, as the vendor in this case, you really have to believe that the client actually wants to have that test satisfied and is not going to string you along forever trying to ask for what, the classic fixed price, fixed scope problem. Okay. So, the whole trust thing is obviously very important. But, I think what we're going to see is we're going to see companies and organizations and even government entities experimenting with and discovering better ways of doing procurement and doing contracting, which leads to better results in the complex world that we live in today. Okay, and I think, that for me is really the promise and the potential of the Agile Contract Manifesto. And I believe, we could be wrong on this, but I believe that we're going to find the values and principles reflected in a lot of the solutions that companies in the future are going to come up with.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, Peter. And I think we are also touching on customer satisfaction versus just following a project plan or just following a timeline or a deadline kind of a thing. It's like you are reaching out to know if what is the customer happiness index looks like here. So yeah, that's great.
Yeah, you've actually put maybe one last thing to mention is the first principle. Our highest priority is to create a positive outcome for the ultimate customers and for all contracting parties. This is the one case where I think we redefined the original Agile Manifesto a little bit. Because the original Agile Manifesto said, our highest goal is to satisfy the customer. Well, when you're working in a contract relationship, what exactly does that mean? Because you have the vendor, you have the client, okay, that is, or the procurer, whoever's buying from the vendor. But then you have whatever that client, whoever they're building for, and who do we really care about? Okay, and the original Agile Manifesto, you might have gotten the impression that the client is king, and whatever the client wants, the vendor gets to salute and say yes, sir. But we've actually put that in context and say, well, we want a good result for everybody, for all of the parties. And obviously, the customer that we need to be paying attention to is the ultimate customer, the ultimate user of whatever it is that we're creating.
Yeah, I like this. If I may continue on where you are, it ties in with the third value, which says adaptive partnerships more than static relationships. And the way that I like to explain this to people is in a static relationship, you have a relationship, which is a good thing, right? Where the things on the right are the basics. But in a relationship where you are staring at each other, you're not looking at the ultimate customer. You're looking at each other, right? And I have I have reviewed too many contracts where there is so much focus on each of the two parties trying to maximize the profit on their side, right? The vendor trying to maximize the amount of money that they get out of the contract, the amount of margin that they make, while the customer, the buyer is trying to maximize the amount of effort that he can, take out of the contract. It's this tension between those two parties, focusing their energy on each other, is taking away the energy that you should be putting in servicing the end customer. And that is something you should try to avoid. And I would say this one, the relationship, which should become a partnership. So instead of staring at each other, taking each other by the arm and looking at the customer, right? That kind of feeling. This one is, I would, in my experience, but maybe the other ones have other experiences. For me, this is the easiest one because a lot of companies are already in that model. They are developing, partnership models more and more. It becomes a new norm. The old world where as a supplier, they don't even see you, you're a black box and you just throw over the wall, that model I don't see very often anymore. The chances of failure are too big for both parties. And so, going hand in hand and looking at the end customer is something it's good that we're talking about it, but it doesn't need that much a push as the two other ones that we talked about earlier. I don't know, is there somebody who has another opinion on this, or do we all agree on this?
Maybe Dipti wants to add something.
No, we all agree. I was actually about to say that Peter highlighted exactly the point which was my major concern. It was never just about customer. As much as we initially came up with the Agile Manifesto, we were all about customer centricity. And it was sort of, appeared as if customer is the god, customer is the boss, wherein it's about all the parties involved. And then, further to add on to what Sten was saying, that uh, yeah, I mean, both the parties are just so insecure, or both the parties have learned over generation that they just have to maximize their own profit. They have to safeguard themselves, as soon as it is an uncharted territory or an unanticipated risk or failure. I think we have to move away from there. uh, in some space, we, in the previous conversations in the same panel, as we have spoken, that it's not just about trust. You cannot simply blindly go in trust. Sen has looked into many contracts. I myself have not only just, I mean, all of us have not only just worked with clients on contracts, but also we do a lot of software development at our end. And oh my God, we really have burnt our hands by just trusting our vendors. The initial conversations and the promise in the contracts were so good, but there is always, a hidden cost. And when the outcome is not delivered, that is when, but I think those failures were really amazing. And so, yes, both the parties, safeguarding their assets, that doesn't work. So the genuine trust, how that can be built, probably it's with the exploration. And that is what is needed in the contracts.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Everybody looks to safeguard their own self when things go south, right? It's like, okay, this is what I had said, and this is what you said. And then when you look at the documents, it's like, oh, it's not even there at all, right? And that's where the things happen. And I believe uh, this contract manifesto will definitely clear out a lot of things, in terms of building that partnership instead of treating your vendor as more as a vendor-customer relationship. That's what used to happen earlier, and still it continues. But when you want to partner with a vendor, or that partnership is what helps, and both become accountable for that thing, right? For the outcomes, what needs to be produced, right? That's what I see most valuable coming out of it. That okay, you partner with your vendor as a partner, and both are responsible, both are accountable as a team to deliver things.
Brilliant. And I think that leaves us with the last value. And yeah, if we can touch upon that as well.
Yeah.
So the last one says joint ownership more than risk-driven accountability.
Nice. Can you repeat one more time? I think I found it very interesting.
Joint ownership more than risk-driven accountability.
That's very thoughtful. Yeah.
And if I have to summarize this one, I'm asking this question: are you marrying for a divorce, or are you marrying for a good life together? And I see too many contracts who are focused on, how are we going to split up at the end of our engagement?
Loved the analogy, Stein.
That was new for you as well. Yeah.
Well said, actually. Yeah. We're looking at prenup, but we are not looking at, what value we are both bringing. Yeah.
Nice,
Yeah,
nice.
But it's a logical thing. Yeah,
that's
Peter.
really interesting analogy, because if you look at a marriage, if the two people getting married don't have any money, they're unlikely to spend time talking to a lawyer to do a prenuptial agreement. If they both have a lot to lose, or even if one of them has a lot to lose, then the chances that they're going to do a let's prepare the divorce kind of prenuptial agreement is much more likely. Okay, and so it's kind of interesting how the forces of love and relationship and wanting a future together, how they come into conflict with the risk mitigation of what happens if it's wrong.
Awesome. Yep.
And so
these are like two sides of coin, what Sen said and what Peter said. Wow.
Yeah.
mhm.
Oh my God, that's definitely amazing, and that's a great analogy that both of you gave towards how we actually start with this contract thing, and how we are already putting some guardrails around us before we are even getting to start a relationship. So yeah, I think all these four values really are well thought after and really well put together from an Agile Contract Manifesto point of view. So brilliant work, guys. I mean, I'm really amazed, and I'm going to spend some more time now looking at it, like reading it and now understanding it. It does make a lot of difference.
And I believe there is a website which is already there, right? If you can, so can someone say what is the website so that people can refer to it?
Yeah, so it's the agilecontractmanifesto.org. Okay, so all in one word, .org, Agile Contract Manifesto. And there you will find the original text of the manifesto. We're now starting to publish translations of the manifesto. So we have it in Dutch, Hindi, Spanish, Finnish, and German. And we're working on more languages. And if anyone, would like to offer a translation as well. There is an opportunity to sign the manifesto. So if you believe in the values and principles, you can put your name on it. And I believe, yes, we also have an FAQ now, which kind of explains a lot of the thinking behind the Agile Contract Manifesto, and why we said what we said, and what we're trying to achieve with it.
Great.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, is there any way, if anyone wants to talk to you guys, is there any way they can reach out to you on Twitter, on LinkedIn, where people can come together and talk to you guys, understand these manifesto more if they want to use it in their organizations, maybe?
Absolutely. All of the creators are listed. There's actually a creators page, and for each of the creators, there's the LinkedIn contact. And so from there, it's very easy to reach out to us.
Awesome.
Okay. Nice. Yeah. So at least if people want to reach out, I would say website is there. You have a Q&As there as well. And if you want to dig more into it, go through their LinkedIn pages of the creators. You can connect with them. You can talk to them. And the best thing is, okay, there is something called Agile Contract Manifesto, which will make life easier for contractuals, right? Which will make life much more better than what it has to happen. And I'm definitely going to jump into those websites, dig into it, and I know whom I can contact. I know all the four of y'all, but I'm slightly more, you know whom I will be pressing towards, right? I know.
You have your biases, Jatin.
Unfortunately, he's been my mentor and a coach, and I have known him since a couple of years. So unfortunately, I get biased towards him, right? So please don't feel bad about it, anybody. So Dipti, Vivek, or Stan, but that's how my life started with him, right? On the personal agility side, and being one of the ambassadors along with him. So that's what it is. But then I think this was a great conversation that, okay, there is a Agile Contract Manifesto, which will make life easier for people. And definitely this might be very new as of right now, but this is going to come into action very soon.
Yeah.
And I wish you all, everybody, all the best. And I would again say thank you very much for thinking about it, because this is not what is there out there in the market or out there in the industry, what people are saying. And trying to resolve that contractual problem is a fantastic thing to happen. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you for
Thank
hosting
you.
us.
Thanks
Thank
a
you
lot.
very much.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for the invitation and for hosting us. And
we,
Catherine, to you especially, thank you for all the flowers. It's amazing.
and we are definitely looking for much deeper partnership with Agile World. So it's, moment just started.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you very much, guys.
Have a nice day. Nice
Thank you.
evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.